Honor, Scott Honor, Jeff Johnson. We do have another candidate in the room who's not speaking tonight, our current state senator and congressional candidate, John Peterson, is in the back. Welcome, John. Just so everyone knows, we have two trackers aiming their cameras at us up there in the back. And if Tom Emmer was here, he'd tell you to come on up front so you don't miss anything, for heaven's sake.
That's right.
And we also have Mark Sommerhauser, our friendly reporter from St. Cloud Times over here, so you're all aware of that. And even though Norm Burdick forgot to bring our flag up here, we will still have a pledge to the invisible flag up here. So if you would rise and have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're very pleased to have two other candidates for governor this month. We had two last month with Kurt Zellers and Dave Thompson. We now have Hennepin County Commissioner Jeff Johnson and businessman Scott Honor. That the format we normally follow is each of you gets up to half an hour to say whatever you'd like to everybody, and then we'll have a question-answer period from the audience. And the rule is, Katie, the rule is that everybody gets to ask one question before I call on anybody for a second question. And I was teasing Kay that being that she squeezed in 6 questions down at the dinner table, she's used up hers for the next 6 months. I said I was teasing Kay, didn't I? So
that's just a grandmother's prerogative.
And how we decide who goes first, normally we've had King Vadian do a coin toss, but he's teaching an economics class at St. Cloud State tonight. Paul, do you happen to have a coin that you could toss somewhere?
Well, sure.
Hey, Paul Brandmeier.
Oh.
Got when we spoke. Do you want that?
Reach out to Texas Roadhouse.
There we go.
Oh,
All right.
Roadhouse.
Heads.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Who's gonna call it?
why don't you?
Go ahead.
All right, I'll call it. I'll call heads.
Tails.
All right.
Okay, so we'll start with Scott then.
Sounds good.
But not quite so fast. That I had the distinct pleasure of introducing former Senator Rudy Boschwitz at an event last Thursday, and as I said, Rudy Boschwitz, a man who really needs no introduction, but doggone it, he's going to get one anyway. Well, the same goes for Scott Honor here. Scott was born in Fridley, and at the time his parents were living in a trailer park. I'm going through some highlights here because I had 6 pages of bio on Rudy, and I said if I went through all of it, I'd talk longer than Rudy was going to. And just going to hit a few highlights that I've got here. Scott became an Eagle Scout. He worked his way through college, including a job, I have to highlight this one, including a job shoveling manure at 5:30 every morning, a skill that he thought he might find useful at the Capitol. After getting degrees in business and economics, Scott pursued a career in the private sector. He helped grow a firm that focused on fixing troubled businesses and brought in state pension plans as investment partners. They bought and fixed more than 60 companies, creating over $1 billion, with a B, of gains for retirees. Scott also started a couple of businesses. He co-founded an online payments company in 1999. And when the internet bubble burst, they had to take the company from 40 employees down to 1. I'm guessing that was Scott.
Nope.
No. And we were scrapping and scrapping to make the business work. He and his brother recently started a business that operates a natural gas filling stations. In fact, tonight he's driving a vehicle that runs on what, biodiesel is it?
Natural gas.
Natural gas, okay. Okay. He has a little different background than most of the candidates that we have that come before the Tea Party, being that it's entirely in business. On the flyer we handed out tonight, I think it said the non-politician or something. Well, earlier tonight he changed it to the unpolitician. So I present the unpolitician, Scott Honor.
Well, thanks for having me. Uh, One of my most prized possessions hangs in our kitchen. It's a letter from Ronald Reagan to me and my wife Jamie, written on our wedding day. We were married in August of 1994, and I'd had the just sort of random fortune of having met the president and got to know him a little bit when I lived in Los Angeles. And he's always been a hero of mine, a role model, and really the first president that I came to really watch in my adult life. And one of the things I remember President Reagan saying was, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for others to do the same. Well, I believe that today, not only are we fighting that original battle for freedom, it's being fought every day, but we're fighting for a different kind of freedom, and it's true right here in Minnesota as well as nationally, and that is the freedom for individuals to prosper. We're fighting a battle of which direction do we take as a society? Do we take one where individuals have their own opportunity to create success for themselves? Or are we in a society where big government, in its benevolent wisdom, is going to provide for us? That's why I'm running for governor, because we're fighting a big battle. It's important. It's important for us today, and it's important for our kids' future. I have 3 young children. They're 12, 10, and 6. And I worry that their future isn't the same as mine. I mean, you heard a little bit about my bio. I feel like I've lived the American dream. You know, having come from very humble roots and having a father that lost his job when I was in high school, lost his job and his pension, and I made my own way and you know, had success. You know, I feel very blessed for having had that opportunity. And you know, and while my hard work, you know, certainly was a big part of it, I also benefited from a great public school education. I benefited from the involvement in my church. I benefited from Boy Scouts. All those things together gave me the opportunity to create this path for prosperity that's blessed me and my family. We have to have our society be one that provides these kind of opportunities for our children. And when I look at what's going on in Minnesota, I see a state that's underachieving its potential. We're not delivering the sort of opportunities that we had as children and that our children deserve. And we're doing, and this is in a whole, a whole bunch of different categories. So, you know, because of my business background, I certainly focus on the economic side of the equation. I think it's critical that we do. We were talking earlier with a group of us about Father Robert Sirico, who I had the fortune to get to know. So Father Sirico is a Catholic priest over in Michigan, and he spends his time focusing on how do you help the poor by getting them a job? How do you make sure that people have opportunity for themselves in a smart and caring way, but do it from the perspective of free market principles and capitalistic principles being at the core of how do we help other people. I understand how that works. I understand how creating an opportunity for someone can help them in their life. And I believe that we need to start with that here in the state. If we, you know, my goal is to help all Minnesotans. Right? We have 5.3 million citizens. I want all of their lives to be better because I'm governor. And to me, that equation starts by making sure we have a strong economy and we have jobs available and we have an ability for people to have better jobs, jobs that they are qualified for, jobs that give them a chance to have rising wages, and that we do that in a way that is helping everyone. So a focus on economic growth is kind of at the core, not only because I see that we're underperforming there, but it should always be at the core of what we're trying to do. And in many ways, I think our country was founded on the proposition of how do we create economic opportunity for everyone? How do we do it in a way that's fair to everyone? And when you know, in some ways, it was a business proposition on which we were founded. And our founding fathers were the true leaders of their time. You have a situation in our country today and in our state today where we're being led by career politicians. These aren't the church leaders, the military leaders, the business leaders in government today. When you go back to our founding fathers and even the founders of this state, those people were all one and the same. And I think we have to get back to the idea of having folks that have a private sector background that understand how the whole thing works in order to provide opportunity for everyone. So in Minnesota, my focus is how do we make sure our state leads the region in economic growth and job creation? Now, there's a lot of ways to do that, but at the core, it's going to be about reforming tax code, simplifying tax code, lowering tax rates, eliminating taxes, taking us back to a point where we're doing as a state the things that we need to do in a smart and effective way, that we look at the budget resources of the state, the taxes coming in as a scarce resource that we use wisely and we use effectively, and we do it in a way where we simultaneously get better results and spend fewer dollars at the same time. Oh, by the way, I know that that's doable because I've done that in my career. When we bought and fixed those 60 companies, almost every single time you could cut administrative costs by at least 10%. Across the board, sight unseen. There's no question that we have that opportunity here in state government. So we can pare back government, truly spend fewer dollars, do it in a way that lets us lower tax rates. At the same time, we can do it in a way that creates a positive virtuous cycle of growth, so we can lower rates and get revenues coming into the state because we're a growing state. And create a business environment where we really create positive growth in jobs by what we do with taxes and by what we do with regulation. So one of the big issues we have in Minnesota is not only are we chasing taxpayers out of the state, by the way, to the tune of about $1 million of annual income leaving every single day, and that's been going on for a decade, but in addition, we're creating a very harmful regulatory environment. So we have a state today that really treats business as there to serve the government. I mean, and you all probably see it in what you do in your days and businesses that you work in or own. Our state regulations are burdening businesses in a way that makes people not want to do business here. Now, we rank 50th in startups today, last place in the country. And companies are leaving. And since this last legislative session, several companies have left the state. Navarre Corp, right down in Plymouth, right by where my campaign headquarters is, left the state and went to Texas. A company called 24 Hour Corp left the state and went to Arizona just recently. That's just a couple that I happen to know the owners of those businesses personally, the founders of those businesses. So we have to have an environment where companies don't want to leave because we have this burden on them. We've got to pare back that regulatory burden. We also have to do it in a way that promotes growth. So one of the opportunities we have in Minnesota is to exploit our natural resources. When you think about how this state was founded, it was founded on the back of natural resources. We had abundant agriculture in the south, timber and iron ore in the north, we have water. Well, today we have a state where the governor and the Democratic legislature are harming our ability to develop those resources. So up north, they're prohibiting the development of precious metals. Great opportunity that we have in our state. In the south, they're prohibiting the development of frac sand mining. We ought to make great use of these resources. So as governor, I would focus on making sure that we've got a path to develop natural resources, to take advantage of those things that give us a competitive advantage, and open up the state to growth. The other thing I do to make sure that we have a competitive environment is make Minnesota a right-to-work state. We ought to focus on making sure that we're competitive in the national marketplace that takes place. I'll give you a quick example. The company I built owns a company in South Carolina. Now, South Carolina is a right-to-work state. They're attracting businesses there. They recently attracted a plant from Boeing. Boeing was doing a national search to figure out where they wanted to relocate jobs from Seattle, Washington to some other state. Didn't even think about Minnesota. They went to South Carolina, not only because it's a right-to-work state, but it's a state that's encouraging growth, it's encouraging business, it's doing it from a level playing field. And they created 6,000 jobs in South Carolina as a result. Well, we ought to be doing that here. We ought to be taking advantage of those kind of opportunities here. And when you look across the country over the last decade, the 23 right-to-work states have seen personal income grow 58%. The 27 forced union states have seen personal income grow 45%. Well, that's pretty telling in my mind. So we've got to focus on how do we make sure that we're competitive nationally that way. And we have to really level this playing field. And one of the real travesties I see is you have the governor's actions today focused on taking our tax dollars and using them to incentivize businesses to come here by paying them off. You know, so the governor's touting how he had a company called Shutterfly moved to Chanhassen. He did it by paying the Shutterfly shareholders to move here with our tax dollars. At the same time, he's chasing other businesses out of the state because of the whole regime that we have of too much tax, too much regulation, not a level playing field. So I'll focus on doing these big things that need to be done to make sure that the economy really grows and gets on track, and we'll do it in a way that gets the citizens of the state as a whole coming behind us, because everyone recognizes we want to have more jobs, we want to have rising wages. Another priority for me would be education. So in Minnesota, we rank last place in the country in minority graduation rates. We have the highest achievement gap in the country. Well, I think these results are totally unacceptable. You know, here's a state where when I grew up in Minnesota, we were one of the leaders in education. We had the first charter schools ever in the country. Today, we have the governor and the legislature actively working against charter schools. I think that's totally ridiculous. I was just yesterday at a charter school in North Minneapolis called KIPP. My wife and I support it financially, and we help out there with our time. Well, KIPP operates a middle school, 5th through 8th grade, in one of the worst performing school districts in the state, probably one of the worst in the country. They operate at a 25% lower cost per student. They pay teachers 16% more, and the students have 2 times better test results as the neighboring public school. Oh, we ought to have more of that in my mind. And what happens instead? The state puts up impediments to growing charter schools. You know, so 2 key issues that this school faces are they need more space. Well, it turns out it's illegal for a charter school to own real estate. I mean, completely ridiculous. So they actually have the ability to find a location if they have the ability to build a building. Well, that's illegal. They have to rent. There are vacant public schools nearby that would be readily available. Well, that's not available to the charter school. Why? Because the teachers union doesn't want that to take place. They don't like the idea of schools that run a non-union workforce that provide better results for students competing against them. The other problem this school has is they've been restricted in their ability to recruit teachers. So here's an example. They recently had a teacher that wanted to come from Colorado to Minnesota. It's a woman whose husband had taken a job over in St. Paul. And they said, look, excellent candidate. She had 8 years of experience teaching in Colorado. She had a master's degree in her field of study, but she didn't have an education degree. And under Minnesota law, she couldn't teach. Well, how ridiculous is that? She has a master's in her field of study, but she can't teach here. Why? Because the teachers union doesn't like that. And finally, you had, in this last legislative session, the governor passed a law that spent an additional $500 million on education. At the same time, he line item vetoed out one thing around education, which is a $1.5 million allocation to Teach for America. So here's a program where young, energetic, recent college grads come to inner city schools and help out, and they're really making a difference, and the program's proven to be effective, and he cuts that up. Why? Teachers union doesn't like it. Well, this is ridiculous. We have to change the path there. Now, what do we have to do in education? We've got to make sure that we're putting forth ideas that let local schools pay teachers based on performance, that they're not burdened by this last in, first out rule that requires them to terminate only the last teacher hired. Right? So right now it's illegal to terminate anyone other than the last teacher hired if you want to downsize. We got to get rid of all the administrative costs there that are taking money away from our students and put that money into the classroom. And we got to have a system where dollars follow students and make sure that those dollars are available for a parent and student to make a decision of where they want their kids to go to school. If we do those things, we could radically improve education in Minnesota, and that should be a priority for everyone. And then my next priority would be just bringing fiscal responsibility to the state government. We have a state today that has failed to look at how to do things better for decades, right? Instead of looking at how do we get better results with fewer dollars, which would be my priority, the state just spends more money across the board in every category. Well, I take a hard look at every program, and we really have to evaluate these programs and ask questions like, why is the state government doing this? Is it the right priority? Could we get a better outcome if we did things differently? I'll do that, and that's very analogous to what I did in my business career. And we'll do it in a way that also tackles the budget in a responsible way. One of the things that really kind of got me going here was seeing that we have a balanced budget rule in this state. And there's all kinds of Mickey Mouse games being played around this. I like the idea of a balanced budget. It's smart. It's a good idea. Well, what do we have? First, we have politicians borrowing from the schools, right? So they couldn't get the budget balanced. So to make things kind of work from an accounting standpoint, they borrowed money from the schools and then supposedly balance the budget. Well, no, you didn't. You borrowed the money from the schools. Next, we have an unfunded pension liability to the tune of $17 billion. That's a big number that's sitting like an albatross on the neck of our children, and it's going up every year. Well, to me, that's like saying at home you balanced your budget except you didn't pay your mortgage. I mean, that's not balancing your budget. We've got to be smart about making sure that this state runs itself in a responsible way. We should spend fewer dollars in state government, not decrease the rate of increase or all this phony baloney accounting gimmickry that goes on. Actually spend fewer dollars, get better results, and do it in a way where we get that pension liability back off our backs. So I'll focus on doing all those things. And I think that at the end of the day, my business background gives me a great ability to bring the right solutions here for all of us. When I look at what I did in my business career, it was starting by having a vision of where you want to go, and then making sure you had a plan of how to get there. Well, we need that here in state government. We have to create a vision of what we want the state to do, of where we're going. It's got to be one that's appealing not just to us as conservatives, but to the state at large. I think, by the way, we've done a fairly lousy job as a Republican Party in marketing our message in a smart way that has people understand that we want to make this state better for everyone. I'll do that. I'll make sure that we've got a well-articulated plan of where we want to go, of how we are going to work toward achieving our potential, which we're underachieving today, that we're going to do it in a way that's going to benefit all Minnesotans, that we're going to have a specific plan of what we're going to do to get there, and then we're going to have the right team to execute the plan. And look, leadership matters. It always does. You see it in every manifestation. And we have to get the right leadership not only at the top of the state government, but we have to get it in all those state government departments. And that leadership has to have a culture that thinks of government's role as serving the citizens. When we fixed companies, we had to change the culture of the business to make sure that we really had a customer service attitude. It was critical. It's hard to do, but absolutely critical. In government, we have to think of the citizens as the owners and customers of government. That means we have to have leaders that think that way, and they got to get the organization to think that way. Tough work to do, but doable. And then we have to make sure that everyone's on board with the plan, that all the stakeholders involved, the state employees, the citizens of the state, get what we're doing, why we're trying to do it, and are working together to make it happen. Same thing we had to do in business. You know, when we owned companies, we couldn't just say, well, make it so because we believe that this is the thing to do. We had to convince people to go do the things that we wanted done. And you always have to convince folks. So we got to make sure that the team we put in place will convince the hard sells that we've got a smart plan and we can execute it. And then finally, we have to measure results. We're failing here too. You know, we don't have the transparency that we deserve out of government. I'll make sure that we're measuring where we are today, talking about what goals we've set, measuring how we're doing along the way, and reporting that to everyone. Those are the same things I've done in my career. And I'll apply myself in a way that is dedicated to making this state better and focused on how do we get that team working together to create solutions for everyone, not focused on how do I get reelected. I'm not going to spend my time worrying about reelection. My time's going to be focused on making the state better for everyone. And then I'd like to see us have an attitude of succession planning. I'd love to see a state where the governor and all the other state officers think, when I'm done with my time, how do we make sure there's the next generation coming up that would do an even better job? Right? I'd love to see the governor after me to be an even better governor than I am. I wish everyone would think that way. You know, if we had an attitude in government that we're here to serve, to apply our skills, that it's a citizen legislator, citizen leader oriented approach, and that we're then going to turn it over to another generation to have their good ideas brought to bear and pursued in a way that makes things even better yet, boy, I think that would be a great place to be. So that's the attitude I have. I'm dedicated to getting the job done. I've taken a sabbatical from my business career. I've got the great support of my wife and family. We want to work together to make this state the great state that we know it to be. And would love your support. We're building a great organization, and happy to take any questions. So thanks so much.
Question coming.
Oh, questions later. Okay.
Yeah, we have both of you speak and then questions. Okay. 35 feet of court up here. Thank you very much, Scott. The more of these speakers we bring you every month, the more impressed I am as to the caliber and quality of the candidates that we have running for national office and statewide office. We are truly blessed to have all of them. Our next candidate tonight, I was teasing at dinner that if all the Jeff Johnsons in the phone books would vote for him, he had one heck of a head start. And just out of curiosity, I looked in our St. Cloud phone book this afternoon. There's at least 9 Jeff Johnsons in there. For those of you that don't even know who I am, I mean, I know Norm Birding probably introduced me a long time ago, but we might be related. I'm Lawrence Johnson, that on the executive board of the Tea Party, and I moonlight as the vice chair of the Benton County Republican Party. Jeff was born in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, where he graduated from high school back in 1985. Boy, you're just a young guy. Got a bachelor's degree from Concordia College, I'm assuming the one in Moorhead?
Yes.
Okay. And his law degree from Georgetown Law School. He worked for several law firms after law school and for Cargill Incorporated. And after Cargill, he founded Midwest Employment Resources. He's currently a Hennepin County board member, Hennepin County commissioner, first elected in 2008 and re-elected in 2012. And previously, before that, he was in the Minnesota House of Representatives. He's married to his wife, Sandy, and lives in Plymouth with his 2 sons, Thor and Rolf. Now there's Scandinavian names for you. Jeff Johnson.
Thank you. I was mentioning that we were at the fair, at the state fair this year. Scott was there as well, and they don't allow you to hand out stickers or bumper stickers there because they're afraid people will stick them on buildings. But you can write down, people can sign up for them and have you send them to them. And I would say 50 of the people who wanted a Jeff Johnson bumper sticker wanted it to give to their friend named Jeff Johnson as opposed to supporting me, but we'll take that any way we can get it, even if they're outside the state. So there are a lot of Jeff Johnsons. Hopefully everybody likes them all. That's kind of the key. Lawrence already gave my background, so I won't redo my bio, but just to say I'm a child. My wife and I are both children of the 7th Congressional District. She's actually from Crookston, and we graduated from Concordia together. And then we went away for a few years. I spent a couple of years in Washington, D.C. going to school, and then we spent a couple of years together where we were married when we lived in Chicago. And we've been back in Plymouth now for the past 20 years or so. Spent some time in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and now currently am the sometimes lone, loud voice of sanity in the wilderness of Hennepin County, as I like to say, on the Hennepin County Board. And I am seeking your endorsement for governor. I'll abide by that endorsement because I happen to think it matters, and I happen to think it's our best path to victory to go through the party endorsement process. And I have watched this governor. I've watched Mark Dayton. I don't know Mark well, but I know him a little bit, and I think he's a decent man. I really do. And I think he is doing what he thinks is best for Minnesota. I just couldn't disagree with him more as to what's best for Minnesota. His focus on a daily basis is on one thing, and that is government. How do we make government bigger? How do we get more money into government? How do we give government more influence over people's lives? My focus as your governor would be very, very different from that. Really, I have 3 goals. And these are the 3 goals that I've been talking about throughout this campaign. Number 1, and this has to be the first goal of our next governor, and that is to turn around the jobs climate, the business climate in this state. We are seeing our entrepreneurs being stolen from Minnesota by North Dakota and Wisconsin and South Dakota. And that is nuts, folks. We are a better place to live, but we've made it so unfriendly for an entrepreneur to start a business here, or for an existing business to expand a business here, that they are going elsewhere. We're rolling over for the states that surround us. When I was growing up, the big concern up in northwestern Minnesota by North Dakotans was that as soon as kids would graduate from high school, they'd move to Minnesota. We got our young people moving to North Dakota now. So the world's kind of upside down, and we need to address that. And for me, that means massive overhaul of our tax system so that we are competitive with the states that surround us. It means regulation reform. It means lawsuit reform, something that I worked on quite a bit when I was in the legislature. It means an end to this obsession with providing subsidies or breaks to the few at the expense of all the other companies, picking winners and losers in the marketplace. Some call it crony capitalism. It means right to work. It means a lot of things. It's not 1 or 2 things. It's really some very significant positive changes in the climate that we have here, because we can no longer just roll over for these states that surround us, and that has to be job number 1. Number 2 for me, and Scott mentioned this, is the education achievement gap, which is the disparity in graduation rates between white students and students of color. And it is the worst in this state, in the country. We have the worst achievement gap in the country, and we have, on and off, for almost 30 years, which is, I think, shocking to a lot of people. I think it's also very shameful. And the reason that hasn't changed, because we've been throwing money at it for decades, and we've been wringing our hands about it for decades, but we haven't changed anything. And it's because we've never seen a governor make that a top priority and just take it head on. And that's something I would do. And for me, that means probably a rather public battle with the teachers union and with the education establishment about real parental empowerment and about real school choice. But I'm happy to have that battle because I think it's unconscionable that we're willing to give up on 10 to 15% of our kids because of where they live or because of how poor their parents are. So that's job number 2. And then job number 3 is really just an extension of my life on the Hennepin County Board. Minnesotans are generous people, and I think most of us are willing to pay taxes to help the less fortunate get on their feet. But the problem is so many of the programs that we fund, they don't produce that result. And that is what I have been trying to do for 5 years now on the county board. Take all these programs that we have that we claim are to help people. That's what we say we want them to do. And then actually figure out whether they're helping people or not, because many of them aren't. I would argue many of them are actually hurting the people we claim we want to help, because it's creating a dependency that becomes generational for a lot of these folks. But there are programs that actually do move people off of welfare to self-sufficiency. And we can figure out which ones they are by demanding that we measure them over time. And the ones that can prove that they're actually changing people's lives, we should celebrate those programs, because that's what we want. But the ones that can't, the ones that we're funding because it makes us feel good as politicians to be able to say we're doing something with someone else's money, by the way, we got to end those programs and demand that government focus taxpayer dollars on programs that can prove they actually change people's lives and produce results. Those are the three areas on which I would focus. I'm a very focused guy, and we'll get it done. Let me add this, though, about, well, actually I want to add two things before I wrap up. Number one, as a local government official, I've served at the state level, and now I've served on the county board, which is, even though Hennepin County is humongous, it's still local government. And I just want to ask each of you to keep your eye on local government. Everybody in this room is concerned about the loss of liberty that we see in this country. And we certainly see it at the federal level, and we certainly see it at the state level, but you know where we see it the most? You know where our freedoms are being eroded the fastest? It's at the local level. And the reason that happens, I think, is because people don't pay attention to what's happening at the local level. So whether it's school boards or city council or town boards or county commissions, and I think this is particularly true in larger bodies, larger cities, we are so focused as government on figuring out how to allow government to use our money to change, to help us, to affect our lives, to change our decision making, to help us make better decisions in our mind as politicians. And I hear it every day on the county board. We kind of understand better what is good for all of our constituents. So let's spend money to try to convince them where to live, how big their lot should be, what to eat, what to drink, how to travel, how to raise their kids. Day in and day out, it's happening, and it's especially happening at the local level. And the reason I bring that up is because I just want to ask you to watch that. And when you have candidates or office holders at the local level who are standing up, because it's very hard to do at the local level. It's much easier in the legislature. You got a whole team behind you. But when you're alone on a city council or a school board or a county board, standing up for the freedom and the liberty of your constituents, it's really hard because sometimes you're ostracized. And have their backs. When you got somebody who's running or when you have somebody who's serving, they need your support. They need your money, they need your vote, and they need you to give them a call once in a while and give them a pat on the back and say, thank you for doing that, because it's really hard. So that is one message. And then the other message I just want to share is I think it's really important that we as candidates are able to share a vision that inspires people. For Republicans in Minnesota, winning is not about who's been in government the longest or who has the most money or who's able to throw out the most red meat to the partisan crowds. That's not how we're going to win as Republicans in Minnesota, in this state. We win by choosing a candidate who can make personal connections with everyday Minnesotans and who can share a positive, conservative message that actually inspires voters, not just Republican voters, but all voters, because we can't win with just Republican voters. And for me, that vision is really several things. Number one, it's a vision of a state where politicians spend money just as carefully and as cautiously as though we're coming out of our own pocket. That's not happening right now. We need our politicians to recognize how hard people work for their money. And it's a vision of a state where every single kid has the opportunity for a great education. Not some of our kids or most of our kids, but every single one of them. And a state where patients and doctors are making healthcare decisions, not insurance companies, and certainly not the government. And it's a state where success is celebrated and rewarded rather than criticized or looked down upon, which we've been seeing for the past 2.5 years. And a state where government, rather than always looking for more money, is looking for ways to empower and energize and invigorate individual Minnesotans in their entrepreneurial creativity. And finally, it's a state where government isn't the center of all activity, and where individuals are the center of all activity. And we've abandoned this philosophy, this progressive philosophy that the poor are poor and the rich are rich, and all we can do is distribute the wealth. And instead we are preaching a true, honest belief that the poor can become middle class and the middle class can become rich, and that anyone who starts with nothing can still achieve anything in this state. That's the vision that we need to share, because it's not about one class or another, about one part of the state or another. It's about everyday Minnesotans who frankly don't pay much attention to politics, but are looking for somebody who gives them a little bit of inspiration and a little bit of hope. That's how I think we'll win. That's the vision I'll share with everybody across this state, and I really appreciate your support. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Now we get into the question and answer from the audience. If nobody has any, I have a few, but we've never run out to the audience in the past. So I see Paul is the first one with his hand up.
All right.
By the way, the question can be for one or either or both of the candidates.
All right. Well, Jeff, I was happy to hear you talk about losing our liberties, because as John can attest to, because I've thrown the gauntlet at him before too. As governor, you know, we don't hear much about it here lately, but here a couple of years ago, there was quite a movement afoot amongst state governors to reinvigorate the 10th Amendment and states' rights. How do you feel about that? What would you do? How far would you go? How would you affect that? Either one of you, or both of you.
I'll start with you.
Yeah, because you addressed it last.
Well, first of all, I agree with that. And the one thing that I consistently try to remind people is that the federal government didn't create the states created the federal government.
That's
And we
right.
have to make sure citizens understand that we are not the creation of the federal government. They are there to serve us as states and as individuals. And so, you know, the first thing I will say is the state of Minnesota should never be willing to accept federal money with strings attached just because there's money involved. And that is the root of almost all of this problem, because when the federal government wants us to do something, almost always the way they get us to do it is by offering a whole bunch of money. So, you know, No Child Left Behind is a great example. MNsure, Obamacare is another great example.
Freeway speeds.
Right, speed, yeah, that's right. There's, I mean, there are, over the last, 50, 60 years, we could give you any number of examples. And most of them, maybe not all of them, but most of them, I think if you went back and looked, we as a state probably ended up spending a lot more than we ever got because we decided to opt into this program because of the quote-unquote free money that comes falling from the sky, which of course comes from us anyway in the first place. So I think you would see me really pushing back against that and saying, if Common Core is a great example now, where we've got the federal government once again trying to instruct us how we educate our kids and what our curriculum should be. And the way they're getting that into the states is by offering a bunch of money with it. And unfortunately, to a certain extent, we bought into that as a state. Some Democrats have, some Republicans have. I think we turn around and say, you know what, we don't need your money in cases like that because we're going to control our own education. I certainly would have said the same thing with respect to early opt-in of Medicaid and MNsure. The federal government offers money so that we will opt in early to Obamacare, essentially, and they offer money so that we build we build the computer system that's been a disaster everywhere. And the answer I heard from Democrats all the time was, well, of course we want to build our own marketplace, even though it's not a marketplace. We want to build this system ourselves because we don't want the federal government to build it for us. Well, you know what? They are. What we built was based upon what the federal government told us we had to do. And before you know it, they're not going to be giving us money for it anymore, and we're going to be stuck with it. So I'm sorry, you got me going. It's kind of a long answer to your short question, but when it comes right down to it, we have to be willing to say no to the free money that comes along with the federal government telling us what we're supposed to do.
And you're willing to go toe-to-toe with them?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sorry. And when I was in the House, I was one of the authors of the bill to opt out of No Child Left Behind, which there was some serious criticism for that because we would have given up a lot of federal money. But it would have been the right thing to do, and I think we'd be better off today if we had done that.
I'll just add a couple quick things. No matter who's governor, we need a governor that will have backbone. It's got to be against the federal government. It's got to be taking on the teachers union. making sure that we're doing things that gets this state back on track, period. Now, the way I think about states' rights is we are an experiment here in the country. You know, I'm on the board of the Center of the American Experiment. It's the 50 states, each doing things a little bit differently. It's one of the great things about this country. And we're unique in the world in that, you know, we are a country that was states giving right to the federal government, and all other rights were retained at the state level. We have to keep that in mind. And you know, one of the things that motivated me to run was seeing that the bright spot in this country, in my mind, in the Republican Party, is in our 30 Republican governors. I sit on a board of executive leaders that meet 4 times a year with the 30 Republican governors. In every state run by a Republican governor, there is something really effective taking place. It's good news for us in Minnesota, too, because we can take examples from these other states where programs have been shown to be effective. We can put our Minnesota overlay on top of them and apply them here. But we have to have an environment where those states have the ability to try things their way. That gives us all in this country the ability to figure out what's working better and what's working worse. And the data is showing that the Republican state policies are absolutely working better. And we want to see that continue. So we're going to have to stay strong that way. You know, I think back to Ronald Reagan, you know, as great a president as he was, the one thing I wish he had gotten done was he had this idea when he started that he was going to abolish the Department of Education. That would have been great. You know, and the more we get the federal government out of our lives, the better off we're going to be in my book.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Over here, sir.
We're both talking about this education thing and standing up and having this argument with the teachers and the teachers union. What are you going to do when the media is in your face bending and twisting things as they do? How do you deal with that coming at you at the same time? Mr. Ventura went through that as governor, and they just were butting heads constantly. So I'd like to hear you guys both respond.
Sure. Well, I wouldn't respond like Governor Ventura did. I can say that because it didn't work. I mean, if the response is to try to bully right back, I mean, you're just going to get into a back and forth, and we can't win that fight as Republicans. We just can't because they have the media, right? We have to be willing to admit that. So I think, in large part, you just go around them as best you can. We have to know going in that we're going to get beat up by the Star Tribune and by most of the TV stations. It's the way it is, right? If you're actually going to stand on your principle, that's what's going to happen. And one of the things that frustrated me the most about being in the legislature was sometimes we would meet as a Republican caucus and talk about what do we need to do about this issue or that. And some members would say, well, wait a second, that's going to look bad, or the Star Tribune's going to beat us up, or can't you see what the headline's going to be? And we'll never accomplish anything if we're too worried about that. So I guess we talk about Ronald Reagan a lot, but that was one area where he was absolutely masterful. At some point he just said, I'm just going to ignore the media and I'm going to talk directly to people, and if you've got a good argument and you make it over and over again and you make it in a way that's positive and not overbearing and not angry, boy, I think, and then you're able to show results, I think you can take them on and I think you can win.
Thanks. You know, I think the answer starts with a marketing plan. This is a broad answer for a lot of things that we need to do better as Republicans. We have to get the citizens of our state to understand that ours are the best solutions. We have to explain what we're doing to everyone and get them behind us. We have to all work together. And if we can start by having the state as a whole get behind what we want to do to improve education, we're a long way along the path that we need to be on. And there are great examples we can take from other states that have been effective in this. And look, when we bought and fixed companies, we didn't have the solutions because we were the smartest people ever on that particular topic. What we did is we picked and chose amongst solutions that had already been applied in other companies and just said, hey, they're doing something smart over there, let's do that too. Well, we have that same opportunity in education. So, you know, just by example, for instance, the state of Louisiana has put forth probably the most effective and most broad-based use of school choice as a way to improve education. They have quantified results that they'll be able to share with their citizens to show how their policies are working. Well, we can take a look at that too. And we'll be out talking to everyone to say, hey, here's how school choice worked out in Louisiana. Their students are doing better. Everyone's benefiting. Let's do that too. And let's start the conversation by making sure that our citizens are aware of the fact that there are better ideas out there that are being shown to be effective and that we're going to apply them too. And so I think it's a combination of being very communicative about what we're trying to do, how it's going to work well for everyone, that there are proven results that we can measure and we can show that the policies are effective. And then at the same time, we got to be willing to just stand strong and take the shots. And look, one of the things I think I have going for me is I'm not looking for a new career. I've already had success in life. I'm doing this because I want to give back to the state. I want to make everyone's lives better. I don't care if I get attacked by the press. It's okay. I mean, I had to do that soul searching before I decided to run. I'm already ready for it. They've already started attacking. You know, the governor and his ex-wife, who's a Rockefeller, by the way, you know, started attacking me for my success about 2 hours after I started running. I mean, talk about irony. So, you know, I'm ready for that, and we'll stand strong.
Okay, Michael.
Primarily for you, Mr. Honor, Scott, if I may, and but also Jeff, Mr. Johnson. You both highlighted the achievement gap. Now, in your case, shortly after you announced last, I don't know when winter and spring starts around here, I came up from Texas. So anyway, sometime in March or so, when did you announce?
April, yeah.
Okay, it was still snowing. That's what
A whole another month after that.
I was still a so-called leader, Minnesota leader of the Café con Leche Hispanic Republicans. Are you familiar with the group?
I'm not, no.
All right. It was the national chairman, who incidentally lives in Marshall, tried to put me on to you. He said that Doc Severinsen, and I know you know American Initiative, says that you are very good, in quotes, on immigration reform. Now, this plays into achievement gap.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, my wife works at Discovery School over here. It's a Jumpstart program,
Question.
working with the newest of the new, almost all Somali children. I was also in Los Angeles in the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. I got to see Reagan a couple of times myself anyway. I get distressed by the moral superiority of the Democrats, progressives, forgive me, in particular, the education and the state scores, forgetting that at the same time, those, I don't like the expression, people of color are between here and here is unconscionable. Both of you pointed that out. The governor, being the chief executive, can do a lot by fiat and otherwise, and by example, by in terms of such things as, I'd like both of you to speak to the achievement gap, and in particular how immigration, which is becoming much more an issue in this state, Somali, Mexican, Texas, California is independent. This is an issue here, and
Gotta ask a question.
and doesn't get mentioned much, especially in a group such as this.
Okay.
Well, I think we absolutely have to focus on the new American communities in our state, in addition to minority communities that have been here for quite a while. And I've got to a key focus on that, right? We have about, I think it's about 17% of our population today are minorities in Minnesota, so it's a big part of our population. And as Republicans, we have to make sure that we are addressing the needs of the state as a whole. I'll give you a quick example around what you just said. When I announced that I was running, one of the first people that reached out to me was a Vietnamese father of one of the boys in my Webelos den. So I'm a Webelos den leader. And I'd been out on some campouts with this father and his son, but didn't know him very well. And he said, hey, I'd like to help you. So I went and took him to lunch, and we chatted. I really got to know him for the first time there. And he said, my story is I was an immigrant, came over, as part of the boat people that came from Vietnam, just a shirt on my back, that was it. And when we got here, after, a church had kind of set us up, but then, the Democrats helped us out. And they gave us stuff that we needed, because we needed to get started. And I viewed myself, and my whole family views themselves as Democrats. But when I hear you talk about how you want the American dream for everyone, about your life story, about your focus on jobs and education, so those are the same priorities I have. He said, he owns a nail salon down in the Twin Cities. And he said, one of the problems I have is my customers are gone half the year now. A whole swath of customers are in Florida for 6 months in a day. That's a problem. He drives 45 minutes so that his kid can go to a good school. Well, that's putting a real burden on him and his family. And he said, when I hear what you're about, I want to help you. And I said, well, you're a Republican. You just don't know it yet. And we have to have that sort of attitude, that we want to embrace all parts of our population, that we want to show how our ideas will let them live the American dream. And I'm putting a great focus on that, and that'll be a high priority for our campaign.
Well, and I would agree with that. It is such an opportunity for us, especially with some of the issues that you've heard both of us talk about, whether it's achievement gap or whether it's helping individual entrepreneurs start a tiny little business in their own home, or buy a car and drive a cab, or buy the corner grocery store. So many of the new immigrants, especially the new African immigrants, they're entrepreneurs. That's why they came here. And we have such a great opportunity to sell that. We have an opportunity with the issue of school choice. The Democrats, they fight that to the death because of the teachers' union. And when I talk to parents in Minneapolis, regardless of their race, but particularly African American and Hispanic parents that are in districts where the schools are failing them miserably, they are so open and excited about somebody who will take some leadership on giving them more choices. So we have tremendous opportunities, and frankly, it's the same thing on some of the social issues, whether it's the issue of life or whether it's the issue of marriage. There are opportunities there, and what we've got to be able to do is articulate them again in a very positive way. Then we got to show up. We've got to be there when when a certain group's having a meeting in Minneapolis or wherever. We can't send other people there. We got to go ourselves as candidates, so that when the Democrats tell them that Republicans are all evil and hate them, they will have already met us a couple times and say, well, he's not evil. And maybe they won't vote for us in the end, but at least we'll have a fighting chance. So I think part of it is just showing up. The other piece, though, is we always, as Republicans, talk about our outreach programs, and I hate that term, because it's not about reaching out and trying to get the votes of certain groups that aren't usually with us. We need more than their votes. We actually need them in the party. We need them to come to caucus, and we need them to help elect leaders. We need them to take on leaders. We need them to write our platform. We've got to be much more embracing of all different groups that haven't been with us before.
I have to come. I couldn't agree more. It's these populations, be they Muslim or Hispano-Católicos, Catholics, or they are conservative. They have family values. They have faith values. They are a natural constituency, and they somehow are inculcated with this notion that the white male Republican establishment hates them. I'm reminded by some lives in New Mexico. Susana Martinez, she says to her husband, we're Republicans, I just didn't know it.
Okay, Kay, your turn.
Okay, I spent 9 years teaching on the whole area, Southern. didn't get a chance to full-time teach as I came in so late. I got my degree when I was 57. So anyway, I would really like to know, you know, it's governor in Wisconsin that stood against the teachers union. Yeah, pay them a wage, but we don't owe them retirement. And we don't owe them insurance. And a businessman, I think you'd say that number one. Why the heck are we taking over that sort of thing? There are other businesses that can take care of that. Retirement, insurance, and that you're running a business. You know, but the other thing is, education used to be the big equalizer in this country. I mean, years back, we had people coming from all different countries, and they spoke many different languages. The equalizer in this country was they were going to fit into the American pattern, and they were going to learn English, number one. If you don't learn English, we have to have something to pull our country together. And our language is a big one. Heavens, ich spreche Deutsch. I mean, my parents spoke German, but they understood that if you want to have, you're in America now. You speak English because that's the language of this country. I'm not telling anybody to give up their language. Anything, that's great. You know 3-4 languages, great. However, our schools, to equalize, I want to know, you have to tell me because I don't know. You say charter school, and you bring a charter school. Look at all these homeschool kids, these homeschools. Where my daughter lives up near Uppsala there, they've got 130 of them. You know, the principal in the public schools begging these people, what can we do to change things so you'll bring your kids back to the school? That's
What's
what
your
we need to
question,
hear.
Kate? What's your question?
Well, okay, but my question is, there are things that need to change on what the equalizer is in the school. The kids are not getting the education that will equalize. They're not getting the phonics, the math, the history, the geography, all this stuff that I got back in the 60s. You know, it's just not there unless you're going to a good private school. Ron has been teaching and taught where I taught. And, you know, homeschoolers, they're paying attention to that. Their kids are getting it good. But I'll tell you, having taught in all these schools, these kids are not getting a fair shake. And they're going out there, like you said, our pattern in the state of Minnesota. We don't have a very good record of, you know, kids knowing their math, their reading, their writing, and whatever when they graduate. And that's not giving them a good start. We have to equalize that. I mean, you know, you tell me what they're getting in charter. Is it any better than the regular pattern of what's in your public schools? Why would you want to send them there if they're still getting what's they're shoving down their throat in a regular public school? You know?
Okay, that must be her question.
Well, I'm sorry, but
That was a broad question. And so, what it comes down to for me it's about choice, because different things work for different parents and their kids. So a charter school works great for some parents and kids. A homeschool works great for some. A private school works great for some, and a public school works great for some.
is the charter any different than the public school?
Sure, well, they operate under different rules, and a lot of charters have a specialty. And so they don't have charter school. What the beauty of the charter school movement was they are relieved of some of the state mandates that a regular public school has, even though a charter school is a public school.
They get money from the same place, so they're mandated to teach what they teach in the public school.
Right, but they are not bound by all the same rules. So that is the positive of the charter school. And the key is we've got to give parents more choice. I mean, we could say every kid's the same, every parent's the same, and here you go, this is what the state's going to tell you, or worse yet, the federal government's going to tell you, you have to teach, and here's your curriculum. And I just think that's a bad idea.
There's some basics you have to have.
Well, of course there are. Of course you are. And you have to have standards. There's no question about
Absolutely.
that. But they should be state-based standards, and you should leave as much flexibility to local school districts or homeschoolers or charter schools as possible, as opposed, we saw this, do you remember the profile of learning? Any of you remember that?
Yes.
It was horrible, and the reason it was horrible was because it was the state saying, one size fits all, we're going to tell every school district and every school teacher exactly what they have to do and how to do it, rather than allowing for the creativity that is the beauty of
But that had nothing to do
teachers.
with reading, writing, and arithmetic, believe me.
Well, I know that, but it was the one size fits all, and I'm not a fan of that, because every school district has different kids with different needs, and we should give some great flexibility, I think, to districts and to teachers.
Well, school choice is definitely at the center of the answer. It's proven to be effective, and so that's what we're gonna have to focus on, making sure it gets done.
A choice of what?
Of what school
Charter
you go to.
teaches the same thing that the government mandates that the public schools teach. What's a choice?
Well, if we give parents choices and they have dollars that follow the students, we'll have better education outcomes.
I think maybe a way of looking at it, as he's trying to say, is you can't abandon the public schools. You gotta fight those teacher unions.
Give them a good curriculum.
But charter
Right.
schools are public schools.
That's
They
right.
are just
So it's no
they're a
different.
school district in and of themselves.
They're just
It-
really
my-
more
my-
disciplined.
Three out of my kids went to charter school right here in St. Cloud.
Mhm.
My oldest one just graduated from Cathedral High School. She was on special ed when she went to charter school when it opened, Stride Academy. She was in special ed. Within 2 years, she was mainstream.
Because they're a little more disciplined.
We were told, yeah, exactly, and they got smaller class sizes. One of my kids, my older son, who's younger than her, he went through charter school the whole time, right? 5th grade, he was doing 8th grade reading, 9th grade math at 5th grade. And the reason being is because charter schools don't hold them back. They go by learning level. And that's the choice that we as parents had. We could have sent them to, North Junior High, but they went from 5th grade into 7th grade at Cathedral.
What are your kids doing today?
Well, they're still in school.
Oh, we do have two candidates running for governor here.
Sorry, it's just that it's a
Would like
subject
to
matter.
continue your conversation out in the hallway.
Sorry, Scott, I owe you some time, okay? We'll make it up to you.
Okay, Sylvia.
I have a question.
For me or for them?
To both of them, are you in favor of a voucher system where parents can choose where they want to send their children?
Yes.
Because of the tax base, because of people that send them to private school still have to pay taxes.
Right.
So I'm asking, are you in favor of the voucher system?
Yeah, when we're talking about school choice,
Yeah.
that's the manifestation of it.
Okay,
Same, amen.
okay.
That's right.
We have agreement. The fellow in the back.
I just have a question for Jeff. And you can both piggyback on it, I guess, if you want. But my question for you, you're an Hennepin County Commissioner, and we do pretty poorly statewide elections, Hennepin County and Ramsey County.
Yep.
And you're not elected county-wide, are you?
No, just
So-
by district.
Because basically, if we lose Hennepin County in the general election by 75,000, pretty good chance we'll win statewide. But if we lose by 100,000, pretty good chance we're gonna lose.
Right.
So because you're from there, you obviously should have supporters that'll help work that area. And so for both of you, what are you gonna do in Hennepin and Ramsey in those areas where we tend to give up on to get us to win?
Well, first of all, what I mentioned before was show up. We have to start actually campaigning there. And it's hard. It's easy for us to say we're going to do that, but next September and October, when we don't have a free minute left and we don't have a free dollar hanging around, we got to decide where the money and the time is going to go. And there's tremendous pressure to put it in the suburban areas and the rural areas that tend to vote Republican, because we've got to get Republican turnout. We can't just do that anymore. We can't. We've got to do a little better, in particular in Minneapolis and St. Paul, but also countywide. And I will say that I do think I have an advantage with respect to Hennepin County, because I represent all of northwestern and northern and essentially western Hennepin County. And western Hennepin County has been terrible to us as Republican candidates the last two cycles statewide. They have largely abandoned our statewide candidates, and we can't win. And those are traditional either Republicans or slightly right-leaning independents. But they have not been voting for our Republican candidates the last couple of times. And those are the folks I represent. And they don't always agree with me because I'm pretty conservative and they tend to be more moderate, but they support me and they vote for me because they've seen that I get results and they see where I focus my time and energy and effort. So I think we won't have to worry so much about Western Hennepin County. And then when you get into the rest of Hennepin County that I don't represent, they haven't voted for me on the county board, but they see me a lot. I end up in Minneapolis at a lot of community meetings because that's where most of our tax dollars go in Hennepin County. So I want to be there to figure out how do we actually make these programs do something. And I think that familiarity will help us.
Well, I just say that focusing on jobs and education in those areas in our state that are most in need, which are in those two counties in particular, amongst some other areas, that's a big part of what we have to do. And my view is, let's not cede any part of this state to the other party. We're here to make everyone's lives better, and we'll be there physically with a presence, campaigning, and we'll make sure that they hear our message in a way that is focused on how we make their lives better. And I'll make sure we focus on that.
Okay, any other questions tonight? Up here in front.
One word, for or against term limits?
More than one word. For, and I co-authored the bill in the legislature to do it.
For.
That was a quick one. There is one question that I'm going to sneak in here, and it was already answered by Jeff, so this is only for Scott. That do you intend to seek the Republican endorsement, and will you abide by it?
Well, I am seeking the endorsement, and we got a great effort underway already to have a group of folks get out to the caucuses and support me, and we'd love to hear from any of you if you're interested in doing that. And we'll make a determination after that process on what we do next. But my goal is to be the endorsed candidate, and that's where my intention is.
Okay. Okay, we've got people going for the second time now. Anybody else that hasn't asked a question that wants to ask one first? Okay.
This is for both of you. Speaking on behalf of my wife and I want to ask you about the fact that we're both disabled and we're, as far as being on Social Security type, as far as do we have to have any concerns as far as time goes on, what in the state to lose our benefit, or is it best as far as us to maybe be seeking work or whatever, as far as, well, because speaking on behalf of myself, I've done yard work in the past, people around the area and whatever. So, what's your thoughts about that? That's pretty much my question.
Okay, sure, I can start. Well, with respect to Social Security, I don't know what to say about that because it's federal and it frightens me as to where that's going to be in a few years. But when it comes to state programs, I mean, here's my philosophy on one of the roles of government. Government should be there to help the most vulnerable in society who, through no fault of their own, need help. Too often, however, we extend that to provide help to people who probably could help themselves but choose not to. And so, I have a strong feeling, and it's something that I've pushed hard on the county board. There are programs that are there to help people with physical or psychological or mental disabilities, or to help the elderly who just, again, through no fault of their own, need some government help. And that is to me, some conservatives might disagree with that, but that is a basic core function of government. And so, I think that's important, and I think it's important that we as Republicans share that with people so they understand that we're not just about slashing government programs and not caring about people, because I think we all do, and we all should make sure people know that.
One of my overall topics is priorities. And when it comes to government assistance, one of the things I see happening is we have the wrong set of priorities. We spend so much money and time in a broad brushed way to give government assistance to a wide range of folks, that we're not putting what I think is the right priority on how to help those people most in need, and people with physical, mental, or other handicaps need our assistance. And I see it at our church. We help people through a variety of different outreach programs. They need additional help. There's more government could be doing to help those folks. And those efforts are being diluted because we're spending too much money and too much time on programs helping people that could help themselves. Abraham Lincoln said 150 years ago, you cannot help men by doing for them permanently what they could and should do for themselves. If someone's in the bucket of being able, physically, mentally, and otherwise, to do things for themselves, there might be a temporary role for government to lend a hand when times are tough. But we should not have government doing for them permanently what they can do for themselves. If you're in the category where you're not able to do that for yourself or need some help, then we ought to be giving people even more assistance.
Okay, at this point, okay, right here in front.
Along the same line, would you be in favor of a work requirement for people that are collecting state welfare and stuff like that?
Absolutely, if they're capable.
Oh, yeah,
actually.
if they're
Yes.
capable, yeah.
I agree.
Okay, Mark.
Question for Mr. Johnson. I heard Mr. Honor say that he supports making Minnesota a right-to-work state. Did I hear the same from you as well?
Yes.
Okay, I see you, Kay, and I see you, but I'm trying to see if there's anybody else.
I want to ask the last one.
Well, you already asked one too, my friend, so that,
It's an invitation in the form of a question.
an invitation in the form of a question.
Sounds like an easy question.
Yeah.
It's a good finish.
Okay. I know Paul Brandmeier has an announcement before we leave here too.
An invitation.
Yes,
I'll
yes.
try and make it black and white, so it won't be too complicated, okay?
15 seconds to ask the question.
Okay.
Get set, go.
First part is, would you require people on welfare to have drug tests? And number two, I was a farmer for 24 years, dairy. Like to know what your opinion on price fixing. One of you was into cardio business, right? And setting the price, government setting prices for dairy and for grains and whatever.
My timekeeper says the 15 seconds is up, so
Oh, you know.
start to stop.
Thanks. Well, in terms of drug testing, I go back to the idea that if someone is on government assistance, we want them focused on how do they get off as soon as they can and get a job. And we should make sure that all of our efforts are geared toward having that happen. And I would be for seeing drug testing for folks that are receiving permanent government assistance. In terms of price fixing, I don't like the idea of government being involved in business, so don't like that.
Those were good answers. But I'm going to be honest on the drug testing piece. I have not considered that one yet. So I will look into that and form an answer and have one next time it's asked of me. And what can I say about price fixing other than it's a bad idea? Free market works, and we ought to let it work.
There was another question that we normally get of our candidates, and I thought for sure somebody would have asked it, but it deals with the minimum wage legislation, and it's bound to come up again next session. If you were governor, what would you like to see happen to the minimum wage situation in Minnesota?
Well, I don't support an increase in the minimum wage for the simple reason that it will hurt the people that we claim we're trying to help, which are the ones at the bottom. And my preference would be to have a strong enough economy where the minimum wage doesn't even matter because the market requires a good living wage.
Yeah, I would leave minimum wage the way it is. I certainly wouldn't raise it.
Okay, we had a couple of announcements that we'll wrap up with. What was your
If it
invocation?
should fit into your schedule, next Monday night at 7 o'clock, would you be able to join us in Senate District 13? The College Republicans at St. Johnson, St. Ben's, we're hosting a CD6 debate with everyone but Emmer, because he's not coming. So it's Crinky, Rhonda, and Senator Peterson. It's at 7 o'clock at second floor of Gorecki on campus. And there's a Facebook invite, so if you're available. Now, our debate, we're only letting the candidates speak. The students will ask the questions. And then we'll probably do something at Sal's afterwards. But if it fits your schedule, next Monday at 7.
Okay, Paul, I know you have an announcement.
Well, speaking of events, most of you, hopefully, all of you have already know that I'm hosting a thing next Friday, week from Friday. So it'll be November the 8th. It's more of a social gathering. Jeff's already said he's coming, but unfortunately Scott's got another a previous engagement. But we've got 12 or 13 last count candidates coming. We've got CD1 coming, CD8 coming, CD6 coming, as well as gubernatorial and senatorial candidates coming. So there's going to be a lot of folks there. It's going to be like an hour-long social type of deal. And then at 7 o'clock, Doc Thompson from Glenn Beck's Blaze Network is going to be the keynote speaker. The guy's a great speaker. Please help me get the word out. There are flyers on the back table there. If you're so inclined, take 1 or 2 with you. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. I don't care who. We just need butts in the seat. Okay? When or where? It's at Sauk Rapids Middle School, Fine Arts Auditorium, week from Friday. Please come. It's on every website I can possibly get to. Benton County, Central Minnesota Tea Party, Minnesota GOP, Doc Thompson's. It's on every website I could think of. It's Facebook. It's going out.
And you might mention it's on the eve of the opening of Deer Hunting.
Now you had to go and bring that up. Yes, I've heard that once or twice.
Well, we won't talk about all the other potential
But the cost is right. It's free.
Free.
Just come.
There's always conflicts, which is one reason why this is the last time we're going to have our speakers night on a Tuesday. We've been having an ongoing conflict with 1 or 2 groups, and there's yet another event this evening which kept some people away, I know. Starting in November, on the 20th of November, which is a Wednesday, is when we will have our next Tea Party Speakers Night. And by then we will be moving on to senatorial candidates. And the one confirmed so far is Chris Dahlberg, the chair of the St. Louis County Board of Commissioners up in Duluth. He was in town this past week also. And we will have another Senate
candidate. For doing this. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We enjoy doing it, and we're open to, I mean, we eventually may run out of candidates. I'm not sure here, but we haven't even gotten into the year when the election's going to be held yet, and we're just starting Senate candidates next month. Do you have an announcement, Michael? We no more questions.
I wanted to piggyback on your first question. A straw poll came out, and I'd like your reaction to your respective performances in the straw poll.
Well,
does it mean anything?
Yeah. Well, I came in first, and so yeah, of course it means something.
Congratulations, Governor. You already won.
Thank you. I mean, here's what I'd say. The straw poll is certainly not an indicator of who is endorsed, because you can give lots of examples where someone wins the straw poll and isn't endorsed. But it's a good measure of where you're at organizationally and with the leaders of the party right now, and I feel good about that. And I really do believe that if you win the straw poll and you run a really good campaign, you ought to be able to get endorsed. So anyway.
And this is the reason I asked respective performance.
Well, I offer my condolences to Jeff. Look, my view is I'm not a politician, and people have to get to know me. And so we're going around the state having people get to know me, and that's where I spent my time. I didn't put time and resources into trying to get delegates at the state convention to vote for us. And I'm highly confident that we got the right campaign to win the endorsement, and that's our focus.
You two bookend the straw poll with identical views.
It's going to be a long campaign for those that started in, March, April, whatever, already this year. We go all the way to a year from next month.
Good.
So yeah, it's going to be a long row, and who knows, we may get more candidates. I've heard another name floating around that might run for governor after the first of the year.
I'd like to know if they're open for bribes.
They're open for bribes, oh, well.
I don't know, Ron, but I am.
You offering anything, Ron, or that?
How much?
Yeah. No, I truly am impressed with the caliber of the candidates for all of the offices. We started with congressional races, and we have excellent candidates there. Then we moved on to governor. We have excellent candidates for governor. And now, hopefully, the trend will continue as we move on to Senate candidates next month. And then again, after the first of the year, we may have to start all over again because there could be more. And these guys would like to come back next year, and we'd love to have them back. So thank you all for coming, and how about a round of applause for our